Welcome to my Fractured and Alterac Valley set review. Today we will be reviewing Warlock, Warrior, and Shaman. So let's get into it. So starting off with Warlock. Warlock got a pretty average set. They got two pretty good 2-card packages, as well as probably one of the best cards in the set. I would say the best hero card, but we'll get to that later. But Warlock didn't really need the help because it already has Handlock, Quest Handlock to be more specific, that reigns supreme at many ranks. So I'm kind of glad it didn't get that much more support for that deck. And I think Warlock will still be in a really good spot after the expansion. I think Handlock will still be tier 1. But anyway, let's talk about the other package first, that being Sacrificial Zoo. So that 2-card package is Sacrificial Summoner and Desecrated Graveyard. These cards both have something very important in common. They are both amazing after a turn 2 Nerubian Egg. So, say on turn 3 you play Sacrificial Summoner after a turn 2 Nerubian Egg, then you will get a 4/4, a 3/3, and a random 3-drop from your deck. So on average, like a 3/3. That's 3 mana 10/10. Granted, you have to play the turn 2 Nerubian Egg, but it's pretty good tempo. This card is giving me unnerfed Edwin Van Cleef vibes. 10/10 on turn 3, that's pretty dominating, and there's not really even any good board clears that can destroy that on turn 3 or 4. I also think that there is some merit to running either Mukla or Injured Blademaster in that deck too, to get off of the Sacrificial Summoner. They might not even be your only 3-drops, but just on the occasion that you get those, then you will have a 3/3, a 4/4, and a 4/7, or a 5/5. That's like an 11/14 on turn 3. Good stuff. I think there's also some merit to playing Drekthar with those cards, because those are very strong pulls with Drekthar, and he also just naturally fits quite well into a Zoo deck. However, you may opt out of Drekthar to play Darkmaster Gandling, or the new Mysterious Neutral Legendary, which also both go very well into that Sacrificial style Zoo deck. Darkmaster Gandling can turn all your low-cost minions that you're playing for Desecrated Graveyard anyway into 4/4s. They actually have very similar effects. Darkmaster Gandling probably owns a Desecrated Graveyard. And the new Mystery Legendary is also very good, if he is your lowest attack minion, to destroy with Desecrated Graveyard. Because, well, I'll get into that more later. But yeah, there isn't that much other support for this type of deck, but Zoolock always has the tools it needs to create a decent deck, and I think this small package could give it the high roll potential to make it really good. So I will give these Zoo deck cards 4 stars. I think they could make a really good Zoo deck that is either tier 2 or tier 3, but I think these are very strong in that deck, and if it's like, say, a tier 3 deck, I think these will probably be the best cards in it and kind of define it. So yeah, now for possibly the best card of the set, drumroll please for Dreadwitch Tamsin. So, after claiming the Demon Seed and raising Fel in Stormwind, she was murdered by her own sister, and now she's back, and undeader than ever. This card is insane. 6 mana for draw 3, gain 5 armor, and deal 3 damage to all minions. Pretty much any time you play it, it's just really good. Also, the hero power is pretty good for a 6 mana hero card. It is a direct upgrade to the Warlock hero power by not taking the damage, and you also get to shuffle in some pretty good tempo into your deck. It does have some anti-synergy with both Quest Warlock and Baron Scavenger / Blood Gem Bristleback, because you kind of want the self-damage if you're playing Quest Warlock that you get from your hero power, but I think it is more than worth it. This card is just really insane. Like, for 6 mana, I cannot believe it was printed this way. And the best part of all, it fits perfectly into an already tier 1 deck, Handlock. I am scared by this card, but I'm also very excited to play with it. Also, fun fact, I think Tamsin has consistently had the best mercenary cards of any of them this year, which I guess makes sense with the lore if you think about it. All 3 of them are very good, and they also go into that Handlock deck. So I think there is a good chance you will see a top-tier triple Tamsin deck this meta. Bad news for anyone who hates alliteration. Up next is the second card package, Full-Blown Evil and Grave Defiler. There's some other Fel support cards this set too, but they're pretty doo-doo. And I think these ones can stand by themselves, especially with Demonic Assault. That's another really good Fel card that hasn't seen a lot of play last set, but it is pretty good in that control-y Handlock deck, and it synergizes really well with Grave Defiler. So Full-Blown Evil is really good. It's a very flexible card, and it is pretty much always good value for the cost, especially in an anti-aggro deck. Any form of control Warlock can poo-poo on aggro even harder now. Grave Defiler is also a really strong 1-drop, Kobold Librarian Who. It is possibly better than Kobold Librarian because you're not taking the 2 damage, but usually copying cards in your hand isn't as good as drawing cards, especially if you can only copy fel cards, which are pretty narrow, and you're not going to want to have too many demonic assaults, say, in your hand, because it's fairly slow, and it's mostly just good on curve. It is kind of nice to have more than one full-blown evil in your hand, though, because you can, say, Grave Devourer turn 1, and then if their board becomes really scary, you can use it on turn 3 to clear it, probably all the way, and then you still have another copy that you can play on, like, turn 6 for a stickless Reno. Also, Kobold Librarian self-damage is possibly a benefit in Quest Warlock. They might prefer having it, so it's definitely not as good as Kobold Librarian, all in all, I think, but it's a really solid card, especially for any deck willing to run the Fel package of basically just full-blown evil and possibly demonic assault. You also don't need that much Fel synergy with this card, because if you're playing Handlock, you're usually going to have a big enough hand to have a Fel card in it, usually, hence the name. So yeah, I'm going to give both of these cards 5 stars. I think they will fit very well into that Handlock deck, and I think it will still be tier 1. These new tools might also make for a questless Handlock deck, because Handlock already has some good tools by itself. I don't think it needs the quest just to survive against the other decks in this meta, and I think it'd be a real pleasure to have a Handlock deck without the quest, and I don't think the Redditors would be complaining about it at all. Now for the bad Fel cards, Fellwalker and Fellfire in my hole. What? Fellfire in the hole? No, dude, I was gonna make a Taco Bell joke. Well, not anymore, you kind of ruined it. Anyway, Fellwalker and Fellfire in the hole are both very slow and very anti-aggro, but by the time you get them out by turn 5 or 6, dealing 2 damage is not going to be enough, and I don't think there is merit to running a lot of Fel spells in your deck to actually draw a Fel spell with Fellfire in the hole consistently. Fellwalker is good with Fellfire in the hole, but then it's turn 6, and you're not going to be running like more than half of your deck Fel spells, I think. So even turn 6, 3/7, deal 2 damage to all enemies, draw a card. Well, you're not actually drawing a card because you're casting 1 card from your hand. It's really not that great, and I think Handlock will just be better, and I don't think it'll be running this package. Fellwalker does also work with Demonic Assault, but then you won't be able to target it, so that makes it just so much worse. I'm going to give both of these cards 2 stars. There is a chance that they make it into some sort of control Warlock-y deck, but I don't think they will see actual meta play. I do think they'll see a little bit of experimentation, but unfortunately the support just isn't there right now. There is just a very small amount of good Fel cards in Standard right now. Most of them are absolute trash. Speaking of absolute trash Fel cards, we have Seeds of Destruction. This card is just too slow. If it was 1 more mana and drew a card, I'd be a lot more hopeful for it, or even just put like 2 into your deck and then drew a card, I'd be a lot more hopeful for it, but it's just not worth the card. It's too slow and it's not enough value for actually putting this card into your deck, and it's absolutely not good enough to support the Fel package by being a Fel spell. So 1 star. Hollow Abomination is too slow and too clunky, I think, to really see any play. It's just a very low cost spell effect of dealing 1 damage to all enemy minions, put on a big body, which never really works out, because if you're playing this on turn 5, that's not going to be that useful, and yeah, you could get big value off of it by killing like a 6/1 or something, then you have a 5 mana 8/8 that deals 1 to all enemies, but that is like the dream, and that's not even that good. So I can't imagine you put this card into your deck. It's very clunky. 1 star. Cool card though. Next up is Tamsin's Phylactery. This card also seems a little bit too clunky and too high cost for it to work to me. 4 mana for just buffing your board with a slow Death Rattle does not seem good. Like, if you're Zoo, you're probably wanting to just win the early board and then kill them after that, rather than building up your board to give them decent Death Rattles. And if you're playing that sacrificial Zoo deck that you'd think this would go into, I think you're more just focused on building big high rolls and then stomping over your opponent before they really have a chance to clear your board. This could be good with, like, if your Nerubian Egg dies early and then you somehow get a big board with, say, Wicked Shipment or Fell Circle, I believe it's called. Fiendish Circle? Fiendish Circle. And then you give them all Death Rattle Summon a 4/4, but that's very clunky. I don't think it's going to work out. So I'm going to give it 2 stars, because it could fit into that Sacrificial Zoo deck. And I do think it will see a lot of experimentation, because it's a pretty cool card. It's Tamsin's Phylactery. Next up is Warrior. So I'm not going to lie to you, I am not a fan of Warrior at all. I really don't like the class. I do not like when it's good in the meta, and therefore I am very bad at building Warrior decks. I don't really know why I am this way. I'm pretty sure it's because of the really cocky smirk of Dr. Boom back in the Rise of Shadows Control Warrior meta. That was just extremely frustrating, and it caused a little bit of damage. I'm going to try to get over it though. I'm working with a professional, and I will try my very best to keep my bias out of my reviews. So anyway, the main thing Warrior got this set was control cards. Control Warrior has not been good for almost a year now though, mainly just because the meta has been very hostile to control decks in general since the Barons launched. But I think that will change. The whining of all the Redditors who got beat by Quest Mage has been so incessant that I believe Blizzard is actually taking their feelings into account. That was harsh, I'm just kidding. Combo decks are kind of a problem, especially for completely shutting down any control deck in the meta, but I do think that it will be different with this set. From what we could see from the revealed cards, it seems like Blizzard is really trying to push control decks, which means they have listened to our cries about combo decks, and I do think that they will try their very best to make control decks more viable. Quest Handluck still kind of does poo-poo on Control Warrior, even with all of its new shiny new tools, but I think if that deck becomes oppressive, even not in a necessarily powerful way, but just in a way that it shuts down the new control decks that Blizzard wants to push, I think they will hit it with the nerf bat, swiftly and violently. I also think there will be a lot of very good aggressive decks in the upcoming meta, and Control Warrior now has the tools to destroy them. So it is possible that it won't be that good at the start, but say they nerf something very quick, I'm gonna count that with my ratings. So say it only starts seeing play like a month in after a nerf, I'm still gonna count that, sorry. So Control Warrior first got 3 really good defensive cards: Snowed In, Shield Shatter, and Iceblood Garrison. And 2 really good finisher cards, Rokara and Captain Galvangar. Iceblood Garrison is a pretty good anti-aggro card. It doesn't seem that impactful at first, just dealing 1 damage to the enemy board, even if it's 3 times. But when you compare it to Immolation Aura from Demon Hunter, that makes it seem a little bit better. Just the next turn, it'll be as good as Immolation Aura, except it only hits the enemy minions, which isn't that important, but it helps. And then it has the potential to be 1.5 times as good as Immolation Aura over time, which is a little slow, as all the objective cards are, but when you're playing it on turn 2, dealing 1 damage to the enemy board is still pretty impactful. Especially because you either play it proactively if you're going first on turn 2, or you play it with the coin on turn 1 if you're going second. Both of those are really good against tokeny decks, so it basically stops them from building any sort of a board for 3 turns. And I do predict that there will be 2 Tier 1 token decks in the upcoming meta, so Iceblood Garrison I think is an essential in that deck, and it really pushes it quite a bit. So you stave off the early game of aggressive decks, and then you also have Shield Shatter for their bigger boards. It's 10 mana to deal 5 damage to all minions, but you can reduce it with your armor. That might be kind of hard to get against aggressive decks to like build your armor up in those first couple turns, but it definitely could happen. And you also have Heavy Plate, kind of incentivizes you to run that to gain a lot of armor all at once to really discount this card. It also incentivizes you to run Frozen Buckler, because then it's just a 2 mana 2 card combo to deal 5 to all minions and gain 5 armor, which is pretty good. And I could see that happening, but otherwise, in any situation except for that specific combo, Frozen Buckler is just pretty bad. 2 mana to most of the time gain 5 armor, unless you're up against a really aggressive deck and have no defense against them. And 1 mana gain 5 armor is absolutely unplayable. So 2 mana gain 5 armor, even 2 mana gain 10 armor, like that's not good. It's not the type of card you want in a value control deck, because it does nothing against other value decks, other control decks, or other combo decks if you are only gaining the 5 armor, which they're not going to be dealing 5 damage to you, so you're only going to be gaining 5 against combo decks. And that's why I'm going to give Iceblood Garrison and Shield Shatter 3 stars. and Frozen Buckler 1 star, because I don't think it's going to make the deck. Rokara and Captain Galvangar are both really good late game cards for that deck. Rokara, she's a hero card, she's decent, so she's gonna see play in the Control Warrior. She's probably the worst hero card of this set. I know a lot of people are saying that, but really there's just not that much redeeming her. Her hero power isn't really defensive unless you specifically get the honorable kill, which isn't going to happen that often, so it could be not even as good as shield block if you're playing against some sort of aggressive or combo deck. And the weapon is good. You can remove damage while also dealing damage to their face, which isn't necessarily something you really want to do as a Control Warrior. It's more for a mid-range deck, but I think Rokara is too slow and not enough as a card for a mid-range deck. But that being said, I do think she'll still see play in the deck. She's just good enough. And it could be important to deal some face damage with her too, because you might not have a great way to finish your opponent as a Control Warrior. And that's where Captain Galvangar comes in. 6 mana for essentially 9/9 charge in Control Warrior, because in the late game you will have gained that amount of armor, especially if you're playing something like Heavy Plate. There is more than just that though. He could deal a lot more than 9 damage with the new card, To the Front. This creates a combo where you play 2 To the Fronts, making all your minions cost 4 less that turn, and then you play Captain Galvangar, possibly Inner Rage it, and then 2 Faceless Manipulators. That's up to 33 damage, and even without the Inner Rage, that is 27 damage, which is quite a lot. And that's only an 8 mana combo too. Captain Galvangar will cost 2, with both of the To the Fronts. Faceless Manipulators will both cost 1, and then you add both the To the Fronts, and that is 8 mana. So Rokara and Captain Galvangar I will give 3 stars. Now, speaking of To the Front, I think, and I know I said earlier that I'm not good at theory crafting new warrior decks or improving on already existing warrior decks, but I've heard it on good authority that Rush Warrior is not that bad right now, and I think To the Front could really push that deck. With Rush Warrior, it's more specifically Rush Hand Buff Warrior, you have a really big hand, and a lot of minions in your hand that you want to get out as fast as possible to turn that value into tempo. And To the Front could really help with that. It doesn't do that much on its own. Paying 2 mana and a card just for some extra tempo with your other resources may not seem that good, but Rush Hand Buff Warrior is very good at generating value with hand buff, and you could get a lot of tempo combining this with its other cards. I also think you'll put Scrapsmith into that deck. It's a little slow, again, but it adds 2 good hand buff targets to your hand, and with, say, just this with To the Front on 5, that's 3 2/4s with taunt. That's pretty good. And if they're hand buffed, which they probably will be, that's a lot better. It just gives some good filling for your hand, and it's a pretty valuable card, honestly. So combine that with some other tools that Warrior is getting. Captain Galvangar will probably go into that deck too, because if he gets a lot of hand buff, he'll be like a 6 mana 12/12 charge. That's a really good finishing card. That is actually very worth it in Rush Warrior. And I think Rush Warrior will sneak into tier 2 next meta. So I'm going to give To the Front 5 stars, because it'll fit into both Rush Warrior and Control Warrior. And I'm going to give Scrapsmith 4 stars, because I think it'll make the cut for Rush Warrior. But probably a little bit too minion board focused for Control Warrior. You're going to be wanting just to destroy every minion in Control Warrior. And for the miscellaneous cards, we have Axe Berserker, 1 star. I think that Honorable Kill will not be that good in the upcoming meta. I think that there will be quite a few cards, Honorable Kill cards, that see play, but just because they are so powerful that they significantly forward your game plan if you get the Honorable Kill off. Axe Berserker tutors a weapon, which is good for Warrior, but they can already do that with Corsair Cash. And tacking on 2 mana for a 3/5 rush body, that makes the effect a lot more inconsistent. I don't think any deck is really going to want that. Plus, Warrior only really has 1 weapon that they want to play right now in a non-Pirate Warrior deck, and that is Outrider's Axe, and that is best played on turn 4. So if you're tutoring it on turn 4 with Axe Berserker, I don't think it really works out. Just too slow, a little bit clunky, and they have Corsair Cash. And finally, we have Glory Chaser. This card could be very good. It's kind of like Field Contact, except for it is with taunt minions, which are worse than Battlecry minions, and it is in Warrior, which is much worse of a class for this effect than Rogue is. That isn't to say it doesn't have any merit at all. It's good with To the Front and Scrapsmith, but that's not good enough to make a deck, I think. And there's not a lot of other cheap taunt cards you want to be playing in Warrior that synergize with this. And if you don't go off on the turn you play this card, it's just going to die next turn. And granted, even getting just one card off of this is not terrible, but doesn't really fit into Control Warrior, doesn't fit into Rush Warrior, I think, so I don't think it has the synergy right now. 1 star. Alright, now that the boring classes are done with, let's get into the interesting stuff. And the interesting stuff is Freeze Shaman. It's back again, and this time I think it will be very successful. Thrall has seen Garrosh putting all these freeze cards in his Control Warrior, and he said, oh, hey, I can do that, but better. And yes, Thrall, I think you can. So Shaman gets Wind Chill, Frostbite, Sleepbreaker, Snowfall Guardian, and Barren Glacier. These cards are all very good, standalone, and the synergy of Frost Spells with Barren Glacier is very powerful. That could mean that you get 6/6 as well as 3 to 4 3/4s that freeze on turn 7, which is pretty good. It is not as good as Sociologist Melissa, but she was actually insane, so that's fine, don't worry about that. The best part about these cards is that I think they slot perfectly into Elemental Shaman, which was already a tier 1 to tier 2 deck in the current meta. It is a shame that they are Frost cards because it messes up the nature spell synergy of Primal Dungeoneer in that deck, but I think it is worth the trade-off because they synergize so well with Barren Glacier. So I'm going to give all these cards 5 stars. These cards have a lot of things going for them. The equation is an already tier 1 deck, plus 5 new cards that fit very well into it, plus Blizzard clearly trying to push this archetype, usually equals massive success in a new meta. So I'm really excited to play these in Elemental Shaman. I think it'll change up the deck quite a bit, and also possibly make it a little bit oppressive, but I don't think that's the type of deck it will be after it gets all the Frost cards. I think it'll just be very good against aggro. A lot of these Frost cards are aggro crushers, which could really balance out the meta, because I think aggro will be pretty strong with some of the other new cards. Anyway, let's get into them. So Wind Chill is 1 mana, freeze a minion, draw a card. That's really good cycle. Like, some decks might already just play 1 mana, draw a card. I know Tradable doesn't see play, but then you're shuffling that card back into your deck, which is usually worse. And you also get to freeze a minion, which is pretty good against any board-based deck. You're stalling that minion for a turn, and you get to control the board a little bit better, which Elemental Shaman does want to do because they're a board-based deck. It also just makes your deck a lot more consistent. It's an easy Frost spell to cast, which really helps with getting that consistent good turn 7 with Barren Glacier, especially if you play him with Talon Forging to always tutor him. And it also just gives a lot of cycle to your deck, so you're going to have a lot more consistent draws. Same thing with Sleepbreaker. Getting that Wind Chill is just really good for making this deck consistently crush aggro and get that really good Frost synergy. And also it's just a 2 mana 3/2 that draws a good card. That's insane. It's like Wand Maker, but with 1 extra attack, and you're getting a guaranteed good card off of it. Plus, it's an elemental. This card is really good. This is like kind of the gateway between Freeze Shaman and Elemental Shaman, and one of the main reasons I think that deck will be playing all this freeze stuff. There is also Snowfall Guardian. This card is a little bit situational. It's not good on every board state, because you freeze your own minions too. But this is a really good card against any board-based deck, because you play it on turn 5, freeze their probably pretty large board, and then get a really big minion, like a 6/6 or 7/7 or something that will probably be able to smack their face next turn. That's pretty good. You just get to really control the flow of the game with this card. And it also has a pretty cool flavor text. There is also Frostbite. This card is pretty average as far as stats go, but it has the Frost tag, and it also messes with combo decks, which could be very good in the new meta. 2 mana deal 3 is actually pretty good. I know that was a card like 5 years ago, but it holds up, I think. And also the Honorable Kill, getting you a nice bonus because that effect lasts until they cast their next spell, which almost every deck does have some spells. That makes this card a lot better, so it's basically 0 mana deal 3 against some decks. And if you're trying to aggro, say, a control deck down before they can destroy your board, or a combo deck before they can like get rid of your board or win, then this card will really help with that. It could actually make the difference between winning a game and losing a game from them soul rending you on turn 4. So yeah, that's quite good. And finally, Barren Glacier. I don't know why this card is an elemental, but it is for some reason, and it makes this deck a lot better because it has that elemental synergy, and you can reduce its cost with that one card. Sorry, I don't know the name. So you can make it playable on turn 6 or even 5, which is a lot more powerful, because it's a little slow at 7 mana, but getting to pretty consistently play this earlier than that, especially once again if you're tutoring it with Talon, then that makes this a really powerful board presence just all by itself. It builds a board that can also freeze your opponent's board, which is just really good. It's a great finisher for that deck. And there's also a few other Frost cards. There is Snowball Fight, Cheaty Snowball, and Wild Paw Cavern. It's not that these cards are worse than the other Frost cards, it's just that I don't think they'll be able to fit into the same deck. They're more about controlling and a slower game plan. So I think they will fit into a different deck of just Control-y Freeze Shaman. I think Control-y Freeze Shaman will be a tier 3 deck, so these cards all get 3 stars. Wild Paw Cavern isn't necessarily a control card, and doesn't actually have the Frost tag either, but I think it is just a really solid card. Like, even though it's over 3 turns, you're getting 9-12 of stats for full mana, and they also freeze, and you're building a wider board that is also not vulnerable to board clears because it's being created over the course of a couple turns. So I think this card is good in a lot of Shaman decks. It's just that it's a little bit too slow for Elemental Shaman, and I can't see it playing any other Shaman decks, so it'll fit really well into this control deck. Snowball Fight is pretty good. It's like Frost Nova if your opponent doesn't have a board, and also deal 1 damage to all their minions. Presumably, it could end the chain before all of them get frozen, but that's the usual scenario. And that's really powerful. This is a very pushed Frost control card. Plus, you pair it with Cheaty Snowball, and then Cheaty Snowball will get frozen and get dealt 1 damage to it. But it is willing to partake in that Snowball Fight because in return, it deals 3 damage to every single card affected on your opponent's board, which is really powerful. And I'm pretty sure that happens even if they get hit more than once. So you can just clear your opponent's entire board. Well, no, you clear most of your opponent's board and 1 of their minions with Cheaty Snowball plus Snowball Fight. And it's just a good card. It's just a 3 mana 3/4 with extra Frost synergy. It also just works with Wind Chill, so that's a really good incentive to run a control freeze deck. Another card that goes into that deck is Brucon of the Elements. This card has really sick art. Look at the Silver Fox. You'll love him. But not only are his apps poppin', he is also just a really good control card. Most hero cards are. He's 8 mana for a very versatile effect, plus gain 5 armor and get a really good hero power. You will probably usually use the lightning and water hero power, or maybe the earth and lightning when you play this guy, because you get to clear your opponent's board and also just stabilize a little bit or get a little bit of board presence of your own. That's really good. And then every turn after that, it's a shame that the hero power is random, but so was Dr. Boom, and he was still powerful enough to give me trauma. So I don't think Brucon will have any trouble seeing play. The fact that one of the options is deal 6 damage to the enemy hero also helps a lot, because Control Shaman doesn't have a lot of great finishing power, and if you're playing against a control deck, you can deal 6 damage on the battle cry, and then once every 4 turns after. It's a shame that it cycles like that, because you're going to be finishing off other control decks very slowly with this hero power. But you do have some other options for finishing. That deck will also be playing Baron Glacier though, of course, and it'll probably have an even bigger one with the other Frostbell in Snowball Fight, and you'll probably be waiting longer to play him. You could play the new Macaw Parrot guy that repeats Battle Cry to repeat his Battle Cry. That's super powerful. Then you could have like up to 3 Baron Glaciers in your deck if you're willing to get that greedy. That could be enough finishing power, but I'm not sure. And finally, there is one more Frost Shaman card, which is very bad, but that's okay. It got so much support this set, like literally every single card except for, I guess, Brucon was a Frost Shaman card, which is crazy. I'm so glad that they got all the support. But the last card is Glaciate, 6 mana for a slow 8-drop. That's just bad. There's better ways to get a big minion for cheaper. It's like you're cheating out a minion, but it's like slower because it's frozen for a turn. So you could get like Morag Forge Fiend. That's a pretty good deal, 6 mana for a Morag Forge Fiend that can't attack, and it's very good defensively, but I'm pretty sure that is like the only good option off of this, because you can't discover class cards, well, cards from other classes, and there's a lot of bad neutral 8-drops. You're not going to want a 6 mana frozen Sneed. Yeah, so this card definitely gets 1 star. I'm very happy that Shaman got all these amazing freeze cards, and I am not a huge fan of the Elemental Shaman deck, but I think this will make me play it a lot more, and I'm glad that Blizzard wasn't too risky with it, with the new archetype, and they decided to just throw it into an already existing good deck. I think that was really smart, and I'm really happy that Freeze Shaman will work out this time, in my opinion. I do think that the writing is on the wall here, that Freeze Shaman will be a good deck. Fun fact, they have actually pushed Frost archetypes 4 times in the past, and this is the first time it will ever work out, if it does work out. Technically, Freeze Mage was good before, but it didn't actually have any freezing synergy, so yeah. For a company called Blizzard, they have been quite unfair to the ice cards.